Shakespeare says in his play Julius Caesar, "Men at some time are masters of their fates. The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves, that we are gamers." Hello there, my name is Space. Video games. What are they? More specifically, what decides what is and isn't a video game? Google says this: a game played by electronically manipulating images produced by a computer program on a television screen or other display. Let's dissect that. What is a game? A game has three elements: a goal, a resistance, and a mode of locomotion. Let's look at two examples, one from the cold, harsh reality of this world, and the other in video games. Football has a simple goal: score more points than the other guys. While you're on offense, their form of resistance is trying to stop you from getting the ball. And while you're on defense, their form of resistance is in scoring points. You must prevent them from getting higher score than you do by the end of the clock's time. Now, let's look at Portal. The goal is to get out. The resistance is more abstract. It's locations, it's things we'll talk about a little bit later. The mode of locomotion is portals. Once again, the nuances of this game define it to a more identifying degree, but on the whole, the goal is all-encompassing: get out. In fact, Portal is our prime example. The game establishes the goal very simply: get out. In this case, it's the starting room. It's the easiest puzzle. You walk through the portal. When the game assumes your ability to connect a portal's entrance to its exit and how to traverse it, it gives you the responsibility of making those portals. Then, when it feels you understand making portals, it applies new resistance, such as turrets, portal diffusing fields, physics, a disembodied voice that insults you as you solve the tests. It gives you each of these individually, and near the end of the game, it throws all of them at you at once to see how well you can handle it before throwing you at the very end. While the initial goal appeared to just be to get out of that first chamber, it becomes known that the true goal is getting out of the facility as a whole. But as my dad repeatedly told me growing up, life isn't all about football and portals. He was right. There's also snuggle time with the boys. But we aren't here to discuss why the middle spot is the best spot when snuggling with the boys. We're here to discuss Call of Duty. First-person shooters. What does that mean anymore? In another time, Call of Duty was what you thought when you heard first-person shooters. Nowadays, the term is used as a general catch-all by the public for any game that has guns or a first-person perspective. In the early 2000s, a game called Battlefield Heroes existed. Coincidentally, Battlefield Heroes was a third-person shooter that they marketed on their own website as a first-person shooter. On the complete opposite side, we have the first-person shooter Chivalry, a medieval melee game. Now hold on, stop. We both know that there are bows in Chivalry. Just shut up, dude. Stop it. You're being so mean. I'm gonna tell Mom. There's a disconnect here. Not all these things can be first-person shooters. The world of video games is changing. Yeah, that's right. I said it. Now who needs to tell Mom? Strategy games fall under a category I like to call big brain time. Big brain time is made up of strategy games, puzzles, Call of Duty zombies, Easter eggs, but not all games can fall into this puzzle category so easily. Take, for instance, the Stanley Parable. It's not really a puzzle because you're told exactly what to and not to do. The agency of those is up to you, but there's no real sophistication to it. Additionally, there are simple puzzles like in 2018 Spider-Man, but these ones are entirely skippable. It's interesting that they would put them in there just to allow players to skip it, especially because the game isn't about puzzles, it's about feeling like Spider-Man, baby! How am I going to make that look cool? At this point, the puzzles aren't even hard or confusing. They're just tedious. On the complete opposite side, there's a little game called Tunic. I don't know much about Tunic, but my friend Matt played it. So here he is to talk about it.
Tunic is a game that takes inspiration from many other great games. It's like Zelda because you hunt treasure and fight monsters, and it's like Dark Souls because you fight giant bosses and save at fires and dodge roll and whatnot. But where Tunic differs is how it includes puzzle-solving elements. In Tunic, you can beat the game by slaying a final boss. Pretty standard video game stuff. Unlike the games that inspired it though, victory in Tunic can also be achieved by solving increasingly challenging puzzles scattered throughout the game world. Space just mentioned Spider-Man and how unnecessary the puzzles are in that game. They're more or less a distraction from the main quest. Tunic, on the other hand, is inherently esoteric in design, making you read through cryptic game manuals and solve perspective puzzles. Even if you want to go the standard route of killing the big baddie at the end, you still need to participate in the mysteries of the game world. Even something as simple as upgrading your character's stats requires a little bit of thought and analysis before figuring out the process, but it's never too complicated. Speaking with developer Andrew Scholdice, he told me that he never wanted the secrets of Tunic to be too hidden.
The philosophy of puzzle design was to leave behind not even clues, but like evidence of its existence in lots of places, as opposed to one big reveal. So imagine you've got a beach. Imagine hiding your secrets just beneath the surface and very broadly, as opposed to burying it at the bottom of the ocean. If it's just under the surface, then people will walk along and probably bump into it at some point. You know, they'll just kick it accidentally. Oh, what's this? Oh, it's here. They're all just under the surface. I just didn't think to look.
It makes either ending enticing, depending on what kind of player you are, because the puzzles aren't just an afterthought. They're not just more content tacked onto the game, they're carefully crafted alongside the combat and exploration to make a full experience. If you want to hear more about this, you can subscribe to my channel, where I'm working on an in-depth video talking about Tunic's design philosophy. That's all from me for now. Thanks, Space.
Thank you, Clockwork. Let's just move on. Let's just move on. Oh. Got a whole interview for that. Sid Meier's Civilization is a first. Why'd you turn off? Sid Meier's Civilization wasn't the first strategy game, but it is a very important one. What was at one point essentially just digital Risk on steroids has now become a mild city planner and a social commentary on intergovernmental politics that also includes tanks. Sid Meier's Civilization 6 Rise and Fall Edition added a city loyalty factor that gauges how easily a city can, at any time, descend into rebellion. Now, we don't need to get into all the nitty-gritty gamer gook, but this is essentially discouraged domination victories from the whole game, especially as the game progresses. What once was seen as a game of domination similar to the Total War series has now completely tonally shifted to a diplomatic, highbrow, stratagem. What connects strategy games to puzzle games is how you apply strategy. The key factor of strategy games is the multiplying sources of resistances and modifiers, such as your bonuses, your opponent's bonuses, the environment, locations of key items, things like that. The puzzle is in applying all necessary factors and making the move that best capitalizes on those factors for your desired outcome. So then, what isn't a puzzle game? All games have multiple factors one must account for, even in something as simple as Call of Duty. And you can't base it off the complexity of those factors or their overcoming, because then a puzzle game is only a puzzle game if it's difficult. And if that's the factor that limits what a puzzle game is, what about 2022's The Looker? For all intents and purposes, this is a joke game, but it's still a puzzle game. For example, 2 plus 2 is just as much of a math problem as all of this garbage is. No, I didn't solve it. Stop asking questions. It's my turn. Narrative video games. Narrative video games. I know any game could realistically tell a story, but these are games that set out to create a narrative. There are generally 2 forms of narrative video games, the kind that happen to the world and the kind that happen to you. Games that happen to the world are games like the previously mentioned Spider-Man or Half-Life Alyx that use the engagement of a video game to tell a story that could be just as easily experienced in a movie format. I'm not trying to detract from the gameplay as a whole here. Both of these titles have a lot to say about gameplay in both of their respective fields and are clearly more than the stories they tell, but when it comes to the rich narratives in games like this, they could just as easily be presented in a cinematic format. I mean, look at Uncharted or Halo. Both of these franchises just recently got cinematic releases, and all the real gamers that saw these gobbled them up and spat them back out like they were week old Sammys in the fridge. Ew, I don't like that. But that's only because these franchises are so story-rich and character-driven that deviations from their main themes are just as easy to spot as a kid who doesn't get enough attention at home so they act out in public. I hate you, Mom! These games are made with a narrative in mind, and like in the case of the Uncharted series, the gameplay takes a back seat to the story. Games that happen to you are games where you control the narrative. I think about the 2005 cult classic Facade, where you type what you want to say and an AI interprets how they want to respond to that message, which is the mode of transportation in your interaction with your friends whose marriage is on the rocks. Your own inspired words choose the flow and outcome of the story and their relationship. More recent and mainstream is Witcher 3: The Wild Hunt, where your choices can determine the narrative endings or flourishing of beloved characters or entire empires. For instance, at the very beginning of the game, you were interrogated about the previous game's endings. One thing that you hear about is the fate of another Witcher named Letho. Now you can say whether or not he lived or died, and that doesn't hold much sway over the rest of the game, but if you say that Letho is dead, you remove an entire 30-minute questline and an interesting character from your game just because you misclicked. Even further from the mark, we have Fallout 4. A game touted for having in-depth dialogue based off your choices and stat blocks, where you can side off with multiple different factions for different unique endings. Except not, because most of your choices are illusions, and the ones that aren't are just like, do you want to fight or do you just want me to leave? Because, like, I hate you, but if you tell me to, I'll dip. And, like, you'll have the same outcome because I won't be around after this and you just won't have this cool gun or whatever. Alright, see ya. Fallout 4 gives you this illusion that you're changing the world, but really not a lot changes based on what faction you side with. Like, they let you keep playing after the final showdown, but the effects of that showdown are few and far between. You might as well never fully devote to one side so you can really experience all of them. But how far are we willing to take this illusion of choice? If video games are just digital versions of regular games and pixel manipulation, is In Space with Markiplier a game? And if so, what about Boss Baby Get That Baby, available exclusively on Netflix.com? No, they aren't sponsoring me, but could you imagine a Boss Baby Get That Baby sponsorship deal? What about 10fastfingers.com, where you're actively trying to type faster than someone else? What's that? Typing isn't the video game? Ever heard of a little thing called Typing of the Dead Overkill? Oh, you haven't? Well, it's an on-rail shooter like that one at the Chuck E. Cheese that costs like $5 and gives you 0 tickets. But to kill the zombies, instead of shooting them, you have to type words like railgun or switchblade or how about dripping wart goo? And if you consider this a video game, are essays for school video games? Ew! To continue with movie themes, we have spooky games that fill up your little gamer diaper with a little too fast. Uh-oh, somebody's gonna call a Boss Baby janitor staff. We got a real stinky one over here. It's midnight, and you're in your mother's basement. You boot up Phasmophobia, and you go over to the door in the corner of the hub, and you hear that little girl whisper at you, "Oh! Uh-oh! Guess who we gotta call again?" Gamers everywhere are now choosing to voluntarily scare themselves and fill up their Boss Baby Get That Baby diapers. I cannot promise that's the last time I reference that masterpiece. In 2020, Phasmophobia, a game still technically in early access here just 2 years later, had a concurrent player base for a solid month of 112,000 players, way to go gamers, proud of you, in a game designed to fill your bot. You get the idea. 2022's The Quarry, another scary game, was played by big gamer Jacksepticeye, and it had over 3 million views on each one of his parts of his playthrough. Rookie numbers, am I right? So here's the big question. Why? Gamers everywhere are wanting to experience thrills that were once only able to be experienced at the movies, but now can be experienced at home and repeatedly with slightly different circumstances, despite little changing from scare to scare. Yeah, I can choose which house I want to go into, but at the end of the day, I'm still getting scared out of my socks by a ghost with a name like, I don't know, Theodore Templeton Jr. Yes, that is coincidentally the name of Boss Baby. That one was an accident, I swear. Look, I could sit here all day and talk about video games. Honestly, I probably will a few more times. But here's the point. It's hard to categorize these experiences even into the 3 general rules that I made. The fact is, video games are art. Yes, all of them. Even Boss Baby Get That Baby. But just like music or art museums your mom dragged you to and you saw your first articulate picture of boobies for free, it's not all there for you. And unlike those boobies, you won't always like it. I think Halo Infinite, even in its current state, is art. That goes for the Saints Row game that just came out, and even the games I might have slighted here, like Fallout 4. Yeah, some of this art has been commercialized into an ugly mess, but at their core they have something to say, a goal they want you to reach. Look at Abzu. You play as a diver who swims near fish and you listen to this beautiful soundtrack. But take away the graphic style and the music and you have a bad game. But with the flair of the design team and the musical score by Austin Wintory, you have a water ballet about environmentalism that you star in. No, not all games have such a clear-cut expressionist theme to them. I could never fully know the authorial intent behind Battletoads. I'm sorry. But not all games are as esoteric as Battletoads or Abzu. In fact, this whole exercise was to point out a lot of these categories are flawed descriptions of the games that are found in them. That's why most game journalists used other games to describe what a game was like before video game donkeys scared them away from drawing comparisons to better give the audience a picture of what the game was. Yes, I'm punching above my weight class. Deal with it. Video games where you have to start over when you die are called roguelikes because they run off a similar mechanic found in the 1985 hit Rogue. The point is, if we just stick to base categorical explanations of what games are, we get shallow explanations of what a game is. When I say a game is a co-op exploration looter shooter, you have no idea what I'm talking about. Here's a list of games that fit that description. Destiny 2, Apex Legends, Borderlands, Risk of Rain, Boss Baby Get That Baby, DayZ, Deep Rock Galactic, Minecraft Dungeons. The list goes on, despite the fact that I listed 4 categories that create what you'd think would be a rather niche little pool of games. Look, I'm not trying to dismantle Video Game Donkey as a game journalist. I'll do that later. But what I am trying to say is video games are complex pieces of art that aren't so easy to pin down into these tiny categories. That's why modern music has a new subcategory for each song on an album, because it's a different piece of art with a different purpose. Even if it sounds like or even directly borrows from another piece, it's something new. So play whatever you want. Tell people your new gaming fix is a mix between Forza and Boss Baby Get That Baby, but with the characters of Skyrim, if that's what it feels like you're playing. Maybe it's overstated, but if you've been waiting for 30 years and 26 attempts across multiple platforms for a game that accurately depicts high-speed, tethered traversal through Manhattan, it's okay to say you really feel like Spider-Man. Because when it comes down to it, that's why so many people make and play games. Just to feel something.